Okay, well, so we're on air, and I'm here to introduce you to the villain of the day. So we're talking about villains because last week we talked about heroes, and I think, well, villains have their own element of fun, don't they? uh, we spent a bunch of time talking last week about Dexter and why he was a hero. I mean, he's a protagonist, but I guess there's been a lot done recently where people are trying to expand the boundaries of what can be called a hero, etc. But I wanted to talk about villains. Villains are so interesting. I guess one of the things that immediately pops to mind when I think about them is the contrast between just bad guys who have no motivation versus ones with motivation. And there's some bad guys whose worldview is so entirely motivated and consistent that you relate to them, and you see totally why they're doing what they're doing, even though it's clear that they are bad guys. So I thought we could kind of jump in and talk about that a little bit. Don't all act at once.
Something that Stephen King actually said once, I think it was On Writing, where he said that you basically master the craft of writing if you understand that even bad guys help grannies across the street. It has to do with complexity. If you actually have a working character as opposed to a villain, then the villain will still be compelling reading, even if he's, whether he's a complicated guy or whether he's seriously just crazy or whether he's just a complex character whose worldview is a bit different from mine, but I can completely see. But it has to do with the way that you write him to make him relatable in a sense.
Yeah. Well, it certainly helps. I have a hard time these days. I mean, I think in a sense we grow up seeing so many just dark ones. Oh, it's the dark one who has to be stopped, you know.
Well, no one's a villain in their own eyes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We also talked last week about how actions make a person a hero, and I think that's partly what we're looking at here with villains. There's a gray area, I think. You know, it depends on what kind of actions you're taking. There's a sense of, I mean, so I suppose you could separate out simple opposition to the hero from the means that are used to accomplish things. But generally speaking, they have to have both of those things. Opposition to the hero and the means used have to be sort of socially unacceptable.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like destructive and chaotic versus peacekeeping or creative, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes all the writers heroes, right?
Yes, we are all heroes.
That's right.
Well, you know, it's funny because how many times do heroes win through battle? A lot, right?
Yeah.
That seems really destructive and chaotic to me, but...
Like, oh my god, that Superman movie where they just level Metropolis. The Zack Snyder one. Everybody complained about that movie so hard because basically it's like, wow, whose death toll was greater, Zod or Superman, after they destroy the city, you know. And
Yeah.
then Superman snapped Zod's neck. And everybody's all up in arms because Superman doesn't kill people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like that movie, but yeah,
No, I think people have been sort of numbed by Power Rangers.
It's the loud colored suits.
You look at Power Rangers and they're always like messing up the buildings, and it's like, where are the people? Like, did they all evacuate suddenly? Right? Nobody gives a single moment's concern to the fact that like there are probably 200 people dead in that building. Crazy.
I never watched Power Rangers. I didn't know they destroyed buildings.
Well, like
Models of buildings.
you've got these massive like huge monsters fighting each other in this city that's like half their size, and you're like, there are no people here, right? But you know what? I was thinking, and I might still write a blog post on this. I was thinking about the ease that people have developed in killing off just random people. Like, there's this sort of, there was, for a long time, it was like nobody could die. And now it's like, we're just going to kill everybody off. And we have no compunction, and we don't have any sense that, in these societies where power is being fought over, there's no sense that killing people should actually be a thing to be avoided. Right?
A lack of consequence, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, now it's like, oh, well, and then this person dies, and this person dies, and it's like, but no, why? Yeah, like, wouldn't you even just, like, think through the possible consequences of just killing all these people off?
Well,
Before
and
you do it?
it's a missed opportunity for really good drama and tension and storytelling to actually deal with that loss.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder though, because at some point, if like the law comes into it, then all of a sudden you're just writing a court drama that stretches over like 2 years of trial law. I don't know.
Well, it's true. Okay, so but I mean, most of the time, I guess it's just easier to create a situation where these people are somehow above the law. You're dealing with the actions of people who are really untouchable, right? By any sort of law enforcement, right? And I thought that was odd, but because like when I was writing For Love for Power, I was thinking through and I was going, these people have, I'm not going to call it a respect for life because that makes it sound all nice and warm and fuzzy, but they do have a very clear sense that their population is not big enough that you can just go around offing people, And so part of it was creating the sense of social context that would surround their actions so that I could define where that borderline was between acceptable and unacceptable consequences, right? Mm-hmm. But if people get killed off, that's a big deal, I mean, part of the whole point of For Love for Power is that when the eminence dies, it's a terrible, terrible loss. And it's an opportunity for people to grab power, and then they all put their, each of the great families puts in one candidate for heir, and they have these various, competitions, like, the kinds of things that you would normally set up. Debates, question sessions with the cabinet members so that you can kind of evaluate these people, whatever. And then but there are rules about when what can happen. And like, people are always going to try to kill off the candidates once they know exactly. Buying votes happens constantly. And people are going to kill off the candidates, but they're only going to kill off the candidates within these very specific time windows, because you can't kill off the candidate before you know that person's a candidate, right? I mean, this is a society where the nobility is visibly losing population, and so you just don't kill people off willy-nilly. That's not what you do. You kill them off only when the stakes are really, really dire, and or I suppose if you're a Lulu, and don't, if you don't have morality, but that's actually kind of not that common. People are trained in this in this world to do villainous things and to manipulate and to do all this kind of stuff, but you can manipulate people and do a heck of a lot without killing them.
People are more useful alive than dead.
Oh yeah, and exactly. And if you can get them in your corner and force them to do as you like, that's so much more helpful than just having them be gone, because then who else is going to take their place? Somebody that you might have less information on, right? I mean, so I suppose this leads into the villainy discussion, because in my world, the villainy is very much a product of the social environment surrounding it, and so the methods used are going to be suited to that environment. I guess that's partly why I wanted to talk about villains and world building. Because clearly in Westeros, all bets are off. They just must have a really big population, and I mean, I can't speak to it. I haven't read it, right? But do you guys have any insights on what makes it so okay for these people? I guess they're just in charge. There's no law enforcement that has a sense of itself being outside of the nobility sort of sphere of influence, or what precisely?
Well, I don't
Anybody?
know anything about Game of Thrones, but I think that is sort of throughout history. If you were powerful enough, you could kind of do whatever, and that this sort of idea of a modern police force that doesn't answer to nobility,
Right.
is newer. So as long as you could buy your way, I remember I watched the biography of the Marquis de Sade, and he only really got in trouble after stuff he did stuff to other nobles. No one cared about the prostitutes he killed. No one cared about anything else, but you step up the social ladder and then it's a problem.
The power.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking, the different social circles and our sort of people and those people down there. And how that affects the acceptability of killing.
In Game of Thrones, there's a lot of desperate power levels, and there is accountability. It's just that the accountability comes way later. You can't just walk up and kill the evil king or kill the evil prince. However, Prince Joffrey gets poisoned, and that's his revenge for being a jerk, for being evil.
Yeah.
And so it's every character that dies for a reason.
Yeah.
And there is.
I'm not saying it's unmotivated or badly done.
No. There is accountability. It's just that sometimes the accountability festers for a long time. There are people who are, like Arya. She's got a big long list of people every night before she goes to bed that she says their names because she wants all of them to die for what they've done. You know, and so she has written the accountability into it. Now there might not be a police force, or the police force are the soldiers of the regime. So anyway, it's one of those things where you have you do have accountability in that particular storyline. It's just that sometimes it doesn't happen right away. In other
Yeah,
words, you can't just
and I
like,
think that the point about the social structure is really an important one. The soldiers of a regime are the soldiers of a regime, so you're not going to be able to have them, you know, take actions that are not influenced by the people who are controlling them, right? I suppose I should add that Varan is intended to be, even though it has nobility and stuff, it's intended to be a more of a modern social contract kind of place. It's not at all a medieval system. It's a very, in a way, it's a very bureaucratic system.
even in modern society today, there are atrocities that are happening in our own country that go because of the people that are in power. And you know, people make the rules and they enforce the rules, and us, you know, every man can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Yeah, there's an echo. I'm sorry. So far, it's not keeping me from processing in my head.
Somebody might have two windows to the Hangout open. So if you close the second the second window to the plus Hangout, that might eliminate the feedback loop. That happened to me a couple times with my station.
Now we lost Raj's video.
Can you hear me?
I think I can hear you, Raj. Was that you?
I'm speaking right now. What's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just don't have your video.
That's odd. Let me see what's happening with the camera. Oh, no. Turn camera
Yeah,
off.
well, we do end up having technical problems here sometimes. Is it so bad that people can't think?
I can think. I do have a couple things to say.
Awesome. Well, is everybody going to be okay if we just keep going and kind of try to ignore it? I mean, I can stop the entire Hangout and try to reboot it.
I don't think that's the issue. Somebody probably has two.
I've only ever opened one window. I'm sorry that I can't speak to it.
Let's try sequentially each muting ourselves one at a time and see if it goes away.
Okay. Jay's out. We're still echoing.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself first.
Okay. Everybody there?
I'm
I don't
here.
hear the echo.
Oh, I think the echo's gone. Mark, I think it's you.
Mark.
Hey, I don't have more than one window open. I know that.
Now, there's other things that can happen having to do with where your mic is in relationship to your speakers.
Yeah, I had that once.
I will go get some headphones. I'll be right back.
Sorry, man. Thanks. Okay, well, let's see if we can resume our discussion a little bit. I think this is really interesting. Okay, so let's talk about villains personally for a second. You know, creating a villain. I don't think you can create a villain without having a social context in which to create them. You okay there, Jay?
I was just gonna say all they have to be is really hot.
What? What?
All they have to be is really hot.
All they have to be is really hot? Yeah, totally. No. You know, it's funny. Okay, so these days there are a lot more hot villains. I would say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there has been a sort of evolution of villains because villains used to just straightforwardly be let's see. Villains used to be just straightforwardly ugly people, others, foreigners, if it's going to be a bad guy, he's going to have a crooked nose and be really fat or really thin, and he's going to, sort of have the evil within expressed somehow in physical appearance.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I don't
I'm
think
glad
we
there's a
see
move
that
away
quite as
from-
much.
Yeah. I'm glad there's a move away from that, at least in terms of the visual being married to character quite as much.
Yeah.
I think there obviously, like for a million reasons, there should be more variety in terms of physical appearance across the character, like archetype. But what was I going to say? But this trend where they're all like super hot.
Well, they do get to wear all the best clothes. And that will, that's going to be our segue into next week's fashion, right? Fashion topic. Villain fashion. You get to wear black and
Fancy hats.
they do get all the best fashions, though.
I think what's happened, if you can hear me, is that there's been a kind of a combination of factors that have taken place. The one thing is that for a long time you could not kill off the heroes.
Mm.
And that made the tension go away because you knew that the heroes were going to be safe.
Mm.
So there's that going on.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the incredible desensitization that we've all been through with TV shows becoming more and more violent. I remember watching Rosemary's Baby in the movie theater and just being totally shocked at the suicide, the blood, and I just couldn't, it was almost more than I could take. Now I can watch stuff like that and be eating while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm a sensitive guy.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we do get desensitized because it's so common to have all this violence, which is kind of creepy sad.
So we have two factors going on. One is people perhaps not feeling enough tension, and then people being desensitized. So that's what leads to certain authors trying to really, keep the attention and take away the possibility that everybody's safe. And that increases the, Game of Thrones is a great example of the result.
Yeah. You have to be very careful with that, and I'm sure that George R.R. Martin is very careful with that. You have to be careful with that because what you lose when everybody is possibly a victim is that you can end up with people not caring because all the people they care about are dead.
Very, very true.
It's a decision-making process. One of the things that I'm finding really interesting about watching Once Upon a Time is that only one person has died, and yet the tension is very, very high. Right? And I'm not very far into it, so say what you will about that. So maybe other people die, but at the same time, there is so much potential, and I think, in fact, there's that thing, fate worse than death, right? There are fates worse than death, because death, it's kind of over, and a death of a person is pretty bad for that person. But the consequences of it, in a way, are worse for the people who are still alive.
Right.
And so I would argue there are really great reasons to keep people alive, and villains are doing that less and less. I mean, I've just leveled a city, got to keep the stakes high. But, it's funny because, we're straying off villains a little bit, but stakes have to be personal as well as global. I mean, just wanting to save the world is not.
It's kind of not enough.
Enough, yeah, exactly.
And if you think about, like, who wants to save the world? It's like, well, all of us in our 20s thought we were going to save the world from,
Yeah.
whatever cause. So it isn't enough, because there has to be a personal motivation for that side of the hero. Like, you want to save, let's say it's your family from, being, sort of harassed in the workplace, right? You want
Yeah.
to do that. But on the villain side too, I think the more interesting villains also have a motivation that is more personal. And then I think it gets a little sticky, because there are a couple of tropes, I think, that villains have where there is personal motivation, but there's different themes of that motivation that occur over and over, like some sort of childhood trauma. There always seems to be childhood trauma.
Oh yeah, that whole revenge motive thing is kind of old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to point out, Reggie, that I did save the world. You wouldn't believe, when I was in my 20s, you wouldn't believe what it'd be like otherwise.
Well done, Raj. Thanks for that. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, so okay. I think it's helpful when villains have problems and they're not just all powerful.
Yeah.
That's called character.
Yeah, well, exactly.
And you'll notice something. It's interesting. Even Tolkien, when he started developing the Silmarillion, trying to come up with how exactly, the Morgoth became what he was, it all of a sudden had to kind of create a backstory where the motivations made sense. Because as soon as you actually look at a character like that and try to explain the actions in terms of previous experience, you've got to have some reason for it. You can't just make it random. In a novel, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. My villain, I guess he's sort of. I mean, he is the villain. He's the villain, but I don't think of him that much as the villain, because he's this kid, right? And he's a product of his society, a power-hungry person, but he's been trained to be that way, right? Because that's how you get ahead. And he's also mentally ill. But I was very careful to go and do my research and make him mentally ill, as if he were actually mentally ill, and not just, oh, he's the insane bad guy, because in a way we have to. Well, insanity and bad guys is a really interesting question, because in a way we have to say, well, why would they do all this stuff? And well, they're not mentally working like normal people is a really good excuse, right? Except that people all over the world can be mentally ill and yet not go out and kill people, right? I mean, it's
happens every day.
Yeah. Mental illness is not your ticket to becoming a bad guy, and so you have to be very, very careful with it, and my particular bad guy, Nicantor, has OCD, and he suffers from it a lot. I mean, by that I mean his life is actually very difficult for him as a result of having OCD, and it influences the way that he tries to change the world, right? And when he has a problem, he has to fix it in a very particular way because he has these fixations in his head, and he's always got something he's worried about. But it's not, well, I have to expunge the population of the human race. Right? I mean, it's sort of like, I really don't want my brother's door to be locked, is one of his major themes. And it makes him a bad guy because he's always trying to break down his brother's door. But in a way, it's about him having access to the room. It's not like he wants anything in there.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. Okay, so it's about in a way, that issue with Nicantor is about creating some very specific kinds of restrictions on what he's likely to do.
Yeah.
Good guys have moral restrictions on what they are allowed to do, and you can play with that, right? When you're going over to the dark side or whatever.
Villains can
Bad
have more.
guys just doing every last little thing in the book to say, oh, I'm really bad. Oh my gosh, the one that immediately comes to mind is Baron Harkonnen. Like, he's going down the checklist. Well, you know, I kill people off, and I eat a lot, and I have sex with little boys, and it's like, he's like the serious checklist of everything evil that you could possibly do, and at a certain point I was like, oh, give me a break, because I lost track of the motivations, and I was like, I don't see what we're doing here besides trying to say, oh, look how bad this person is, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's better if you have a systematic set of restrictions on what the bad guy is willing to do that fits into his character and motivations.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, all bets are off, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I find interesting when it comes to storytelling and villainy and how we look at villainy is like the idea, especially for something long form like a novel, or let's say it's an episodic television series that goes for several seasons. Is when you get into story arcs where you have a conflict of what people want or what they think is best for the world, and there's this gray area of like who is the bad guy and who is the good guy here. And there's two examples in television that I can think of off the top of my head right now that played with this in an interesting way. Whether or not it was successful is another question. But Alphas and the 4400.
Okay, tell me about them.
Okay, well, in Alphas, there's like this mutation that happens where people develop particular skills, like like powers, I guess, and they see it as like sort of the next step in human evolution.
Okay,
And of course, like, you have people who think this is wonderful, and then you have the government who is made very, very nervous about this, so they think there needs to be regulations, and, I mean, it's very similar to, like, ideas that we've seen in things like X-Men, right?
Yeah,
So some of these people form communities of their own, and some of them go into therapy, and the therapist is played by Strahan. I can't remember the first name right now.
Jason Strathern.
No, not that guy.
No,
Jason
no,
is the
it's
action
not.
person.
There's Jason Strathern and Jason Stratham. It's
It's
very
very
confusing. Jason
Yeah.
Strathern is the
Anyway.
British action hero.
we should sometime talk about how to name characters. I'm going to put that on.
Well, that's the actor. It's not like the character's name is a psychologist, I think, or psychiatrist who's very gifted, and he works with a group of these people, kind of, and they work within a government agency so that they can benefit the government, and there's this goal to kind of bring the two sides together in a harmonious way, right? That does not tread on human rights. But of course, the government is always treading on human rights, but there's this interesting push-pull between the doctors group and what the government wants from these people. And then you have the uber villain, right? And that character's name is Stanton Parrish. He is a guy whose mutation has allowed him to live for centuries, and he has all these other abilities that coexist, but no one really knows anything about them. And it's very dangerous and scary. And when you first meet this character, you think he's ultimately a sociopath, that living that long has made him very hard and cold. And it seems to everyone that he is bent on the destruction of the non-mutant world, right? And to make the world a better place, you have to get rid of the non-mutants. That's what people think.
Yep, it's totally the Magneto motivation, yep.
Exactly, but it turns out that that is not the case. He's absolutely pretty much the opposite of a sociopath, and that what he's trying to do is build a better world, and that it's an old show, so I don't feel bad about spoilers. And in the end, he sacrifices himself in order to achieve this vision, also. But you never know how it goes, like how it really.
So he basically wants something that nobody else comprehends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're willing to use really bad methods to get there.
Right. So you can't tell throughout the arc of the series who's really the bad guy and who's really, you know, like it moves through all these like areas of moral relativism that's difficult to parse and makes juicy, interesting storytelling as opposed to this blanket like, oh, well, obviously this person's a bad guy because whatever. In the 4400, there's some similar things that they do there, and you know, and the bad guy changes. Sometimes the bad guy is the same person as the good guy at the beginning, and I think that is really rich with potential, like that idea of moving that. Sorry,
Yes.
I feel like I'm.
No, Reg, you just made a really awesome point, and I want to pick up on it.
Okay.
That if your bad guy is not changing, that is a problem. Because why should your bad guy not have a personal story arc just like everybody else?
Yeah.
Right?
One of the things I loved about Game of Thrones is that the bad guys you hate in the beginning, book 3 or 4, I don't remember when, we start seeing their point of view and the motivation behind what they did and why they did it. And they start to endear upon you. And you're like, no, I hate this guy. But it certainly makes for a richer reading experience.
Well, and I've been noticing that also in Once Upon a Time, and that's one of the things that's really fun. Is Evil Queen is pretty straightforwardly evil, but at the same time, you keep learning little nuances in her life that you're like, okay, you can see where she's troubled and whatever. But the one who's really interesting is Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, oh man, right? He's like ultimate bad guy, yet does not have designs on making the whole world a horrible place. It's just you just don't want to mess with him. And the further you go, the more interesting his motivations become. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm still watching the show.
I don't want to spoil anything because I'm all caught up, so I can't talk about it much.
Don't talk about it. It's okay. I'm like right at the beginning, but it's okay. I'm enjoying all the mysteries and figuring out who everybody is and what happened to everybody and all this kind of stuff. So it's all good, But I think I'm still in season 1. What do I know, right? Nothing.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately, I don't think the show kind of kept up its quality through the arc. I think the writers kept writing themselves into corners, which is kind of unfortunate because it certainly started off with a lot of promise. But you'll see.
Well, you know what? At a certain point, if you're writing a show that's expected to go on for a period of time, you have to start working harder.
I don't think you're expecting it to be all that successful, but Dexter, to me, is the most interesting one in terms that you mentioned at the beginning, because Dexter's first season was so brilliant. Everything made so much sense that there was just no way they could do it. From there, it was all downhill. You just cannot make, that would take years and years to put together something that clever.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's tricky, and ideas get plumbed, and then you're in trouble. So
there's also a ton of one series shows that had these grand arcs, or 2 or 3 series shows that had these grand arcs that never came to fruition because they got canceled. I'm thinking of Flash Forward and Heroes and a few of those that were just had potential, but like Heroes died because of the writer strike.
Right.
Yeah.
Twin Peaks, actually, I thought was heading in a very interesting direction, until it was blown out of the water by becoming unpopular. I think I don't know if you ever watched Twin Peaks. This is going back in time quite a ways, but I think it was going to turn out to be that the White Lodge and the Black Lodge were the same place. But anyway, I think you know, the the reaction of the writer and everybody involved in the show basically made them write up the final episode was just well, screw you everybody, if you're not going to like the show, we're going to just ruin it.
So that's a sort of writer villainy. So what else? I don't know. Like what else? What else are we going to say about villains?
I have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
Which is that I use this trick in the Shootout at the OK Corral, and the sequel has kind of an explanation of it. The villain there actually has really good motivations, and it all makes sense, even though he's willing to do horrible things. In fact, the secret underlying theme is do the ends justify the means? And I kind of try to answer that in that book. But this is a guy that really has, he's trying to kind of save his planet from kind of tyranny. And his motivations are great, and his capacities are great. He's just willing to do horrible things to get it done. Yeah. And then in the book that I'm writing now, the sequel to it, basically it turns out he was completely fooled. So you have a villain who's being tricked into being a villain. Yeah, and that happens often enough. Often enough. So a second ago we were talking about villains and how they might change. So I want to go into that a little bit further because I have I have a couple. Well, I have a couple of these guys. And Nicantor changes over the course of the story and becomes more isolated and more troubled and more vicious. And basically everything that everybody tries to do to stop him just ends up making him more powerful and more vicious and horrible, which is a little rough. But I mean, it's sort of odd in a way because he's this troubled 15-year-old kid. But in a way, one of the things that I wanted to do by writing the book at all was to say, well, how does a guy like that get to be in a position that he's in and evil and all that, So the fact that he would have an arc was actually really important. How do you get to be a villain? Why does it make sense to you? I mean, I didn't want to have a sort of a, well, this one event happened and totally cracked his soul, because we see that a lot. Yeah. Too much. And I wanted to get a little bit more into it. And then the other situation that I have is that in another book that I'm writing, a character who was originally he was originally one of the good guys. Except now he has to be one of the bad guys. And he becomes a good guy later. So that is a very different type of story arc, is that, he's in a position where he is doing really, really bad things. The Cantor is still implicated. But in a sense, well, I'll give you a little hint. This is the guy who's working for Nicantor in the next book. And so he's being asked to do really horrible things. But he doesn't do them because he's unwilling to do them and he's just being forced to do them. He does them because he feels that that's his meaning in life, is to do what Nicantor wants him to do. And so it's been really interesting to try to figure out how to get him out of that position when he's so deeply bought into it.
Well, that's interesting because that speaks to your task system, right? And in the world building that you've done. But in a larger sense, as it might apply to other people's work, is it very much speaks to power dynamics in personal relationships and social relationships hierarchies, things like
Yeah.
that. And how that hierarchy might compel someone to behave in a way that is quote-unquote villainous, but
Yeah.
that might not define the whole character. And that's another one of those like awesome, changeable, great potential for tension and drama. Kind of
Yeah,
thing.
because so with this particular character, I didn't even know he was a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
I wrote him as a good guy, right? Just very dedicated to his job.
Another thing about villains and is that I found, I just started watching The Strain, and there's obviously a big bad monster villain, and he's got his regime of villains working for him. But I was also interested that, and this you see this a lot in. You see government officials saying, no, 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 this couldn't happen. I've got my own agenda, therefore I'm not going to do what's right. I'm going to do what serves me. And that happens, I see that a lot. And those characters are no less villains than the bad guy. And they really add tension and add drama. And I really like that aspect, as long as it's not too blatantly overdone.
Well, and I think that's a really good point you're bringing up, and I think it's really important to look at. Well, I mean, Reggie was just saying power dynamics. I think that was Reggie, but anyway,
Yeah.
and evil systems and good systems, right? A person who's acting for their own personal agenda rather than for a system that would promote justice is going to be a villain, right? Then you've got these people who are trapped within a system that is designed to break people down. And its momentum is such that it's very hard to stop, right? We have that going on in our own lives, right? We have systems of inequality that have been built into the foundation of the way our government works and the way our police forces work and the way that our nation works, and 200 years later we're still struggling with how to stop the momentum, right, of the cultural beliefs and the systematic things that are set up to allow people to exclude or make sure that these people don't get too much or whatever it is. Well, I mean, gosh, doing research on current situations in the world is really instructive when you want to set up a system that's the villain. Because in fact, in a way, the whole idea of the Varan world is that the system itself is the ultimate villain.
Yeah.
And everybody in it is a victim of it at the same time that they may be working for it or against it. So the villains are working for it or within it, and the good guys are working against it. But everybody is constrained by it, and everybody is everybody's actions and decisions are essentially constrained within it and in a part influenced by it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a way, they talk about all the different kinds of conflicts that you can meet up with, like man versus nature, man versus man, and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so it was important to me not just to set up a situation where individual villainy was the big deal, but to say, everybody has a relationship to the larger system, and in the larger system is where the problem lies.
And zero-sum games where for one person to succeed, someone else must lose.
Yep.
And it's not that you're out to harm the other person, it's just if you're focused on your own success, by the nature of the system, you're going to harm the other person.
Right. Yes. it's setting it up so that if you're going to protect yourself properly, somebody else is going to suffer.
Yes.
Yeah.
The pawns. They're all pawns for you, like in X-Men, the third one. Wait, we'll keep the elites, hold them back, and let all the pawns do their jobs. And I like villains with plans, as opposed to villains who just are bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the like some of the least, like if you look at like Bond villains, especially from like the old movies, they don't really have any character development. They're there to be the villain of the film, and then talk, and then monologue, so that James Bond
And you can't really figure out where they got all the money to build their.
Yeah, or like whatever, or like the systems in place are ridiculous. Yeah, or like they just have like some weird motivation that's just like tossed off in like one line, and it's usually some kind of weird world domination thing.
It's very typical of the genre.
I always thought Bond villains were there to pet cats.
Oh yeah, really. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cats
All right,
are
I'm
evil,
ready.
we all know it.
And let me put you into this deep trap and walk away so that you can get out and come kill me later.
Yeah, well, we're at 12:02, and I'm sorry about the late start and a little bit of technical difficulties, but thank you all for being here. You're making me feel incredibly popular. So we had spoken about talking about fashion next week, and I'm not going to let Che down. We'll talk about fashion and world building and that kind of thing. And then I think the following week I would like to talk about naming characters, because that is a topic I've actually never picked up on my show. And so I think it would be really fun to kind of get into it. And if you would like to come, I guess I can't really. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but we'll talk about it again next week. I would love for you to come with examples. I'm giving you homework.
The fashion or the naming?
Fashion is good too. You can bring examples. I usually, what I usually do is I usually spontaneously ask people, well, so can you think of an instance of this, and people just talk off the top of their heads. But in the naming situation, if you have stuff from your worlds that you're working on, or books that you've read that you thought the naming was really cool, or I don't know. Personally, I'm going to go and look up which names I want to bring in to discuss. We might actually talk about the design of a particular name, and so if you have particular names that you'd like to talk about, well, how I came up with this or changed it or whatever, then that would be really great. But mind you, that's going to be in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So the 25th. Thanks, Mark. Mark has a calendar. Boy, I appreciate you being there with the calendar when we needed it. All right.
I actually have 3 monitors. So.
Wow. Awesome. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the broadcast.